Fuels, and thank you for coming. We have been in Greensboro since 1924, so we are always excited to help the community. And I would like to introduce you to our field supervisor, Eddie Baum.
Thank you, Valerie. First thing that I want to say is, one, this was supposed to be a class. It's not really a class. This is a general discussion. So it's just me talking. Second thing I want to say is thanks to all you guys, because it's becoming a cliche today, but no truer statement made that people run away from disaster and first responders run towards it. And I just want to say thank you from me and from Berico for that. This is kind of covering basics. I apologize if I'm being remedial or if I'm being elementary here, but we just kind of want to touch base on some things. Some of the things I got thinking about, hey, this is kind of basic and simple, and then I got thinking, I've been doing this for 16 years, maybe it's not basic to everybody. So, first thing we're talking about how the system works. Heat pumps versus gas furnaces. First, let me ask you a question. Does anyone know how a heat pump actually heats? Nope. A heat pump, most people are surprised because they don't know. A heat pump actually heats off of the refrigerant. The same refrigerant it uses to cool with in air conditioning, it actually uses to heat with. It actually reverses the flow, the cycle of the refrigerant in there, so that, for lack of a better way of putting it, to put it simply, the indoor and outdoor units change place, if you will. So where normally you go out in the summertime, you put your hand over the outdoor unit, you'll feel warm air coming out the top of it. It sort of reverses that, so you're getting the hot air inside, the cold air being blown outside. That's a very simplistic way of looking at it, but that's actually what it uses to heat with. Now, it has a backup heat source, which is electrical. Most likely, when you guys are called out on a heat pump call, it's going to be due to that because it's an electrical issue. With any system, HVAC system, you actually have two types of electrical. You have low voltage, which is almost always 24 volts, which, as we all know, is not really going to shock you, unless, of course, your hands are wet, that type of thing, standing in a puddle of water. You may get a little zap out of it. And, of course, it's high voltage. Now, on a heat pumps work off of 240 volt. Gas furnaces work off of 120 volt. Okay. This is important for you guys to know, because if you come to a gas furnace, and I don't know if you can see this one, but you'll have a switch that's just like a light switch, but it should be located on or very close to the furnace. And it's just a little light switch. You flick that, it kills the power to it. On a air handler, you'll most likely have a service disconnect, which is just one of these. This one is a straight pull disconnect, non-fused. Just grab it, pull the T-handle out, it kills the power to it. Again, if you're having issues with a heat pump, it's most likely going to be electrical, so that's the first thing you're going to want to do. Of course, I'm sure you're all told to go to the panel, find the panel. If you're throwing breakers, these are going to be a gas furnace or an oil furnace is going to be a single throw breaker, and because it's 120, and it's going to be a double pole 240 if it's a heat pump. So that's the most important things to know, the differences between the two and where to find the disconnects. The disconnect should always be close by the unit. There is an exception with that. If we're in here and technically that breaker panel that you guys can't see behind this whiteboard, that breaker panel is visible, then by code we don't actually have to have a disconnect right there. We can run it straight to that panel. So again, that's important for you guys to know, because rather than fumbling for a disconnect, you go straight to the panel. It's right there. If it's visible and accessible, we don't have to have the disconnect. If it's not, if it's across the room, we have to have a disconnect right there. For various reasons, for you guys, for us, when we come to service it, if you guys need to kill the power quick, then that's what the whole point of it is. And so it has to be close by. And like I said, the different breakers are important to look for. You don't want to be looking for a double pole if you're trying to kill the furnace and going for that. As we all know, you guys may have experienced yourself, they're not always well marked. So if you can find a switch or disconnect, is probably your better bet anyway. Going to problems that you guys will come out on. And I thought about some of this stuff, and I thought, well, it's kind of elementary again, but Then I thought of some incidences that I've come across that thought I would share with you guys. It's kind of a couple of funny things. One, the heat pump. Can it produce CO? Any carbon monoxide out of this unit? The answer is no, because there's nothing combustible. It's not burning. So there's no combustion process going on in a heat pump, so you don't have to worry about CO. And I say that because I've had customers say, oh, there's carbon monoxide in my house with my unit, and they have a heat pump. No, it's not the unit that's producing carbon monoxide in your home, it's something else. So they'll call, I've had them call us out, and they should have called you guys. They're calling us for a problem that we can't correct. On gas furnaces, and this is an oil-fired furnace, they both produce CO. The CO is usually taken out of the flue pipe, dispersed into the atmosphere. You should not have any CO around the furnace in here unless you're directly at the burners. If you have the doors off, there's the burner compartment. Now, if you take a CO detector and stick it right here, you will probably read CO because it's really close to the burner. Most of those taken and dissipated out here. Now, another odd experience story for that one, caught out a year or two ago, I guess it was a couple of winters ago. Had a fellow helping me run emergency call duty. It was late at night, probably midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. Cold as blue blazes. There was snow on the ground actually. And we got called out and said, hey, the CO detector went off in this customer's house. The fire department came out. The fire department said, they detected some CO, so we need to get out there and see what's going on. So we rushed over there. That is a priority call for us. So we rushed over there to see what was going on. And when I get over there, I break out the CO detector and I go all through the home. I check everything. Can't find any CO. The furnace was in a furnace room outside of the home. I go in there, no CO. So I get talking to the customer. The fire department had already left. And I said, the call I got said that they detected CO when they came in. And his detector was still going off when my partner had arrived there, and he disconnected. And he said, yeah, so they came in with their tester, and I said, well, did they get CO in here? He said, no. So did they get CO in here, in your house? No. So where did they get CO? He said, it's exhaust at the end. Well, you're going to have CO at the exhaust at the end, and I'm here to tell y'all that. So if you're going to check for CO and you get the end of that, that's like sticking your CO detector at the end of the tailpipe on your truck. I promise you, you will have CO2. So that is, it sounds funny, but, and again, I thought maybe this is remedial and this is kind of super basic stuff, but some people don't realize that it's a shock to some people when I tell a customer that they have carbon monoxide going out in their chimney. They automatically go into panic mode. Really? You have had for the last 30 years since you had this furnace. So it goes up and it dissipates. But the problem that you run into with carbon monoxide in the home, if you come in and you're getting carbon monoxide in the house, and a lot of times it can actually come through the actual vents. The reason that happens is that inside of here is what we call a heat exchanger. When your fire burns, most of your burners are as this one. They're called in-shot burners, which basically means that they come right out the end of the burner and it shoots out like a torch flame. So you got a torch burning up into a series of tubing that's almost like tailpiping that goes up, winds back and through and snakes through this unit. As that blows into that heats that metal up. So that metal gets super hot. The blower then comes on and the blower blows the air across that hot metal, and that blows your warm air in your house from the gas furnace. Okay? So that's long and short the way that thing heats. Now your carbon monoxide is being produced here, blown into that heat exchanger, and it's actually being sucked out via the exhaust. You see we have two pipes here. On this particular furnace, this is intake, so because it has to have enough air for combustion. As you guys obviously know the fire basics, you have to have oxygen in order for a fire to burn properly. So that's what this is for. In order for it to burn properly, it has to take in air. This is the exhaust. This is a draft inducer assembly. The draft inducer motor, what that does, that spins. There's a little squirrel cage, we call it in our industry, a little wheel that spins, and it actually helps sling that draft out to get rid of that exhaust. The furnaces are actually built with a lot of safeties involved today. If this draft inducer doesn't turn, it doesn't produce enough of a whirlwind effect, which is creating a vacuum, it won't light. It won't even attempt to come on. The reason being that there's a pressure switch in here that works off of negative pressure. So whenever this motor is turning and that wheel is spinning, it creates a vacuum. And that vacuum pulls that pressure on that pressure switch. And that system is designed to have the pressure switch pull at exactly the right amount. So if that is reduced for any reason, it will stop and shut the whole system down and say, okay, we can't run. Because I can tell you from my end, because I've had this incident in training before, if that's not running and this were to actually light, it burns out. Like the fires you guys are used to fighting, it will actually burn back instead of burning into the heat exchanger. So, as that heat exchanger is heated up and the CO is brought through it, it's actually looped back and forth through that heat exchanger until it is actually pulled out and dissipated. The biggest problem in our industry that we run into as far as what I call the furnace killer is that heat exchanger cracking. If that heat exchanger that heats up that series of tubing or clamshell device gets cracked or a hole rusted in it, now where do you think that carbon monoxide is going to go? It goes right out of that heat exchanger. What did I tell you is blowing across that heat exchanger? The air from the blower is blowing across that heat exchanger, so it's going to blow it straight into your house. 99% of the time, that's where you guys are going to have a CO problem. Is from either a bad combustion, it's not burning properly, or the heat exchanger's cracked. And if you guys come in and see that, and I apologize, if you guys come in and you see that, then you automatically know to call us. Tell the homeowner, hey, you need to get Berico out there. You got a problem with your furnace. That's where your issue is. So, no CO with these. If they're saying they have CO, you need to look elsewhere in the home. Of course, you know, it could be anything from an attached garage and somebody had a car running to the gas cooked stove to gas logs or type of gas heater. On the incident that I told you about, where they checked the end of the exhaust went out there was no CO in the house, there never was. The CO detector went bad. And if you guys don't know, the old Nighthawk brand, it's got a nice little digital display. They're really nice looking, really fancy. They're actually fairly expensive and they plugged into the wall. They were great until they went bad. And every one that I ever seen go bad, that's what they did. They just go off for no reason. And they're not going to shut up until you disconnect and pull the battery out. The sensor goes bad in it, and that's just what it does. It just goes nuts out. Smoke, of course, is going to be probably the number one reason people call you guys out. Hey, I smell smoke in the house. 9 times out of 10, when they smell smoke in an HVAC unit, it's going to be from an electrical issue. That electrical issue, I want you to know, can either come, of course, from this motor, but usually from the blower motor that sits in here. Because this is all internal. As I said, this blows the air in through the system. So if this gets filled with smoke, it's going to come right out of the vents. A lot of times the motors will start to burn up and it'll produce smoke while it's still turning. So then it's really shooting it out of the vents, and of course people panic. Again, I bring this up. I have another funny firefighter story with that one too. Actually, not that long ago, we had a blower motor burn out. When it burned up bad. I mean, it had what I call a meltdown. The windings in the motor literally melted out, blackened. I'm sure smoked like the dickens. Of course, you guys are trying to, hey, we're trying to eliminate the threat. So they came in and they hosed everything. Everything in the unit was dripping with foam. When really it was the blower in here that was the issue. The only reason I bring this up is I tell you guys that, where you're looking for smoke, 9 times out of 10 is going to be an electrical if it's in our HVAC unit. Whether it's going to be from this or that, either one of those will produce an electrical fire. Okay? Now, on a heat pump, up in here, you have the auxiliary heat kit that I mentioned to you before. That is high voltage, and those can burn out. And you can get some strange things that happen. Had a customer call me one time and said, there's a terrible odor in my house. I mean, it is sickening odor. I can't stand it. I turned the unit off. I'm not running it. I can't stand it. And it's cold. I'm trying to run heaters to try to make up for it. So I go out there and have him turn the unit on. It's a heat pump. He was right. It was putrid. Just the worst smell ever. You go to looking at the blower. A lot of times things get in there and get in the blower. Blower's fine. Nothing in there. Everything's good. I ended up having to take the heat kit out. When I pulled the heat kit out, there was a mouse that had gotten on that heat kit. Now, to put it simply to you fellas, you look down in the old toaster and you got the little wire, little spring coil, or the old electric heaters. They still make them. I saw them at Walmart not that long ago. It's a little spring coil. That's your element. That's basically what these things are. It's a spring coil element. And this thing was laying across there just roasting. And it was a putrid smell. So you're going to get things like that. You get if a good bug makes its way up in there and hits it, it's going to smell. They're going to get something. I've actually seen a mouse get into a blower, lost the blower down, the blower burned up, created a smoke. Teamed with the mouse smell. The people were freaking. Yeah, fire department came out, said, hey, it's you don't have a fire. They sent us out behind you guys, and I said, hey, not a pleasant discovery to find when you reach your hand into a blower and feel a dead mouse. So y'all could have removed that for me though, but I mean, I'm just saying. I mean, you could have got it out before I got there. So if you smell smoke, then in a heat pump, it could be coming. This is going to be your blower section. So inside of this door, you have the blower wheel, just like you have down there, and you have the electric heat kit. Everything is there. Of course, the very first thing you want to do is kill the power. So you find that disconnect, pull it up, pull the thing out, and then you can go from there. As the systems are designed to be fairly sealed, if you take that door off, you're going to find where the smoke is and where it's coming from, and what's the cause of it, basically, and then send us out. That's just kind of to help you guys sort of pinpoint where the problems may be when y'all go out, so that you're not, wasting time. I'm sure you got other fish to fry, as the old saying goes. Other than that, we also need to deal with the type of refrigerant that we have. I pulled up partial MDS sheets here on our refrigerants, and the refrigerant is not explosive. It's actually not listed as highly volatile unless it's under pressure. So, unfortunately, our systems are under pressure. Even standing pressure, they're under some type of pressure. But if the system were running, it is feasible that a line could blow loose, and blow refrigerant out. Now, while the refrigerant itself is not really listed as flammable, there are oils in that system. And I can tell you from brazing these systems in and out that if you hit a pocket of oil in there, it's going to flame up like a candle. Now, it's not going to be an explosion. It's not going to be a big volatile volcanic flame, but it will flame out like a candle. The problem that you guys have to worry about is if you have refrigerant and you suspected that refrigerant, I'd have it. Come on in. If you suspected that refrigerant is burning, that creates a very toxic gas that hopefully you guys will have your breathing apparatuses on so that you can get fresh oxygen, because that stuff can actually shut your lungs down. It will actually, for lack of a better way of putting it, darn near melt your lungs from the inside out. It is a very dangerous gas that they say once you inhale it, never really goes away. It actually stays in there with you because it's heavier than the oxygen in your lungs, so it sits at the bottom and reduces your lung capacity. So that, to me, would be the biggest danger in the refrigerant side of things that I would be worried about on your end. Make sure that you got your breathing gear on, because if that unit does catch on fire and is burning off the refrigerant, it does create that very toxic gas. And I know I've gotten a whiff of it a couple of times myself, and I can assure you that it burns like nobody's business. It feels like you breathed in fire when you get that up your snout. So it's not a fun feeling when that hits, and you can actually feel it in your lungs. You can feel it. If you ever had the flu and you know your lungs get kind of heavy, you can actually get an instant of that. There's an old saying, an old wives' tale, don't know how true it is, but they say if you get enough of that and you inhale enough of that, if you stand on your head and open your mouth, it'll come back out. Don't think I've ever tested that theory, but that is an old wives' tale that I've heard. Whether that's true or not, we'll have to ask a medical professional on that one, because I didn't feel like standing on my head in the customer's yard just for good measure, just to find out if that would work. So that is obviously the worst thing of that. Now, then we come to other things on the heating side, which is our fuel. Everybody knows natural gas, is it explosive? Can it blow up? Yep, it sure can. So the first thing that you want to do is locate the gas shutoff. This one is here. Usually it's a blue or red handle. And we call this a gas cock. You just grab that, turn it halfway. These days it shuts off. Older systems will have the old style gas cock, which is basically a little square nut in the middle of it. And I don't know if you guys have seen those. They usually have an arrow on it that lines up when it's flow or not. And you turn it halfway and it shuts the flow off. Makes a bigger pain in the butt for you guys, because I don't think you go in there with wrenches in your hands trying to, do that necessarily. You have to get another tool. If it has one of these, you can shut it off there. Of course, if it's a major thing in the house, I'm sure you guys are going for the gas meter and trying to shut it off, that type of thing. Oil, kind of the same thing. We put oil shut off here, sideways, is blocking the flow. If the handle is in line with the line, it's flowing fuel. And it's flowing into this. This is a reservoir cup. A filter cartridge is inside of here. So this is actually full of basically kerosene, for lack of a better way of putting it. Some of the older furnaces still burn kerosene. It's actually number 2 fuel oil that most of them use now. As far as the flammability on that, yes, we know it will burn. It will not explode like gasoline does. It's the same if you're familiar with the attributes of kerosene. Number 2 fuel oil is basically the same. It's just the way that it's refined as to what it is. Number 2 fuel oil, diesel fuel, and kerosene are all similar properties. They're very close. It's just a matter of the amount of refinement that goes into the fuel. So can this burn? Heck yeah. It can burn. But the funny thing is, you have a puddle of fuel oil, and you have a lit cigarette, and throw down that fuel, 9 times out of 10, you just put the cigarette out. It won't burn. You have to have a heavy spark or a flame usually to ignite that. Now, on natural gas or LP with the propane, that's another story. You have a good, strong enough cigarette, you have enough gas that's filled the room, you're going to have a large explosion. And we're going to hear about it. I don't know if y'all noticed the big giant propane tank sitting out in our parking lot out there. If, God forbid, that there be a problem with that thing, if that thing goes, probably have a Greensboro go with it. Because it's a really, really big tank with a lot of explosive in it when it blows up. So there's lots of safety precautions that's taken with that when they're filling the tank up, when they're loading from the tank. Huge safety precautions are involved in that. Matter of fact, our fuel guys, our propane guys, when they're filling up at your house or at a filling station or wherever, they actually carry a remote shutoff valve for the truck. So if they happen to step away from the truck and there's an issue, they can actually hit the button and automatically stops it, shuts the flow down. So if they're having a spill or if there's a spark danger, they can just hit that button. Now that's important for you guys to know too, because if there's an accident and you go there and you got a fuel guy down and his truck's pumping, you can find that shutoff on his belt and shut the pump down for you so that you're not scrambling to try to find something to shut it down and putting your lives and everyone else's lives in more danger by wasting time trying to do that. So you can find that and shut it right off. Again, you're going to have, whether it's natural gas or LP, you're going to have a shutoff like that of some type. It may be on a copper line, it may be on a hard black pipe line such as that, but you'll have a shutoff there to shut the immediate threat off here. And again, you may want to back up further than that. At this point, I guess we want to step outside and show you guys a couple of things outside on the outdoor units as well that you can run into. Out here on, these are what we call the condensers. Now you have a condenser for heat pump, which as I said, does both heating and cooling. You have condensers for air conditioning, which is just straight AC. The main thing that I want to show you guys over here is that, again, you should have the same type service disconnect right here. You see this unit is running. All you have to do is pull that out. And it kills power out here if you're having an issue out here at this side. Probably not a bad idea if you're having an issue, fire or possibility, kill power on both ends. As far as that goes. You do have the refrigerant lines out here. So if you're having an issue with a fire at the home, this goes back to what I said, you could actually feasibly burn into that line or get hot enough to melt the solder loose, and then you're blowing and you're getting that poison gas that I was telling you about that you really want to be careful of not breathing. Again, this electrical motor, so is the compressor down inside. Either one of those can burn out. I've actually seen compressor has a unique issue where it holds the refrigerant inside, but it has to have electrical connections that run inside to the motor because it's got winding just like a normal motor does. There's a seal around that connector that holds that refrigerant in. Several things can happen over time, issues with the compressor, whatnot. It can actually blow that seal out. When it does, you will probably get a call because it sounds like somebody is shooting a very loud shotgun right beside of your house, and that thing blows, and the refrigerant blows off with it. So refrigerant is rolling up out of here like crazy, and it freaks people out. I've actually been at a compressor when it does it, and trust me, I've been doing it for 16 years, and it scared the hell out of me because when it goes very loudly. It's all the pressure that is behind this. And while we're talking about pressure, understand that the newer units with the newer refrigerant, they can run, you have a high side and a low side of pressure. The high side of pressure on these things can get 400 PSI or better. That's a lot of pressure running. If that compressor blows or one of these lines blows off, it's coming out. Okay? The immediate danger for refrigerant blowing out, does anybody know what that is? Frostbite. That is some cold stuff. I've been burnt by it. I've had freezer burns from it. When it blows out, it shows no mercy. It's coming straight. There's not really much you can do about it. Just get out of the way. Because all that pressure, that 400 some odd pounds of pressure is coming at you. So the best thing you can do is just move, clear everybody out of the way. There's only so much in the system, it'll dissipate, it'll go down. Okay. Where you have a serious situation, again, that I would be concerned with, that blows off and that catches by flame, now you're gonna have that poison gas rolling. Because while that's shooting out there, if it's got a flame on it, it's gonna be burning. And that's, if it goes up in the atmosphere, it dissipates. If you guys breathe it in, like I said, I've done it, you'll know it, and it's not a fun feeling. Same thing holds true out here. If we have this box where it's visible and accessible, technically we do not need this disconnect right here. So if you look and there's no disconnect right here, look and see if there's a panel nearby, because that'll be where your breaker is. Again, these are all your outdoor units are 240 volt. So you're looking for a double pole breaker. So you just reach and grab it. Most of them will say AC. A lot of times when you go to a panel, it'll say air conditioning, and it's really shutting off the indoor. Because people mislabel it. I mean, I'm sure you guys have seen that, and you get to it, and then half the time you get to it, there's nothing in there. And you're looking at an old panel box with 50 breakers in it, and you have no idea which one is which. And so that's why I want to go over that with you, because basically I'm telling you that what to look for, depending on the type of unit that it is, on what type of breaker. All right, these are LP tanks. These two are what we call twin together. So you've actually got two tanks connected. So normally this is a 120 tank each. We twin them together. You truly never get 120 gallons out of it, because you have to have room for expansion, because especially in the heat of the summer, it expands. You have to have room for expansion, otherwise you'll have a blow off situation. So these usually only hold about 96, where it's rated at 120. Usually holds about 96. So they put two together so that they can not have to keep coming back out and filling them up all the time. If we want to locate it closer to a structure, this is what we would use. Usually the 330s, the big tanks that y'all might come across, are going to be further out in the yard, further away from it, because there's regulations how far away it has to be. These can be practically right up against the structure, as long as there's no open windows or electrical, that could create a spark. Brought you out here to show you this, because if you guys want to come take a peek in here, every one of these actually has a shutoff valve on them. And it's just like turning off a water valve. All you do is turn that. Now, if you have a twin tank like this, you have to turn both tanks off. Otherwise, you can be getting LP coming from the other one, because they're just connected. It's basically just making one big tank. So you'll want to shut both of these valves off if you need to. And there's actually a gauge on here that actually shows you how much LP is in the tank. So if you're wondering, or if you're wondering how volatile it may be, you can actually look in there and actually see that. But all you have to do is grab these lids. They're never locked. Grab them, flip them up like that, and just shut the valve off, just like you're turning off a water faucet. And that should eliminate any threat from the LP. Of course, as with everything, if there's a threat of fire, you want to hose these down, keep them cool, and then give us a call, and we can actually come out and remove the tanks and get them away from the situation. But you can keep these cool if you've got a fire nearby. Try to keep them cool so they don't get overheated, and of course create an explosion hazard. So, all right, we'll go back inside. Now, as was brought to my attention, one other thing that you guys will face is whenever the first starting of the furnace or the heat pump for the season. They haven't let it run, and a lot of people these days are conscious of energy saving and trying to keep their bill down, so they're throwing on jackets and sweaters and blankets and trying to hold out until they absolutely have to. Even though if you call into Berico, one of the first things that you hear on our automated voice message is, we suggest you try your furnace to make sure it's working okay for the season. And we start that like now. So we're telling people, hey, start the furnace, A, to know that it's working, because if it's not, you can give us a call and we'll come out and take care of that for you. And B, if there's an issue with a smell or odor or smoke, it's not where you need to run your heat, and you're not going to feel pushed for it, shut it off and call somebody. But every season, inevitably, all summer long, this furnace hasn't been heating. All summer long, this has been cooling, not heating. So dust, spiders, bugs, whatever gets in there, can settle on the heat exchanger and can settle on the coil of that heat kit. Remember the story about the mouse? Well, you got, and trust me, I've been to some that have set so long where they didn't run them, and no offense to anyone, but the house was not really clean. They didn't really pay attention to their filters, and there's been about what seemed like an inch of dust on top of the electrical element in this. Now, if you don't know, dust will burn. Dust will stink, and dust will smoke. And they'll get smoke. Where's that smoke coming from? Coming from here. Where do they see it first? Rolling out of their vents. Because that blower is blowing right across that heat source, which is smoking, and it's blowing it right into their house. So then they panic. They freak out. Hey, my unit's on fire. We call the fire department out. And this is what, in my industry, we call a nuisance call for you guys. Because you're going out going, nah, just some dust on the heat exchanger. Just some dust on the heater there. That's very important to know, to tell people that, hey, this is going to happen. Just like it's just a given, it's a thing. In our industry, if we put in a heat pump, especially for somebody that's never had a heat pump before, you guys know that heat pump condensers outside defrost themselves? They'll actually go into a defrost mode to melt the frost and ice off of the coils and the lines and the compressor outside. Now they frost up because, as I told you, they reverse process from the cooling. So that's cold air that's coming out there. So you put your hand over that thing in the wintertime, and trust me, we hate going to heat pump calls in the wintertime if we have to work on the outdoor unit, because we're out there freezing our buns off. We're bundled up with everything we can, face masking the whole nine, because we're standing over that thing blowing up in our face while we're trying to, do stuff on the unit. That causes it to frost up. The more moisture that you have in the air, if it's a real moist day, winter day, where you get a lot of fog and stuff, you get a lot of fog, so you're going to get a lot more frost on your heat pump condenser. The heat pump condenser, to defrost, it actually shuts the fan off outside that y'all saw turning out there, switches into air conditioning mode. Now that usually blows people's minds when you tell them that, they don't know. But it actually goes into AC mode, 24 degrees outside, and your air conditioner comes on. It brings on your electric strip in here at the same time, so that you're not blowing cold air in your house, you're not really blowing warm air in your house either. It's just sort of mediocre, lukewarm. It's not cold, it's not hot. But what it does is that those lines inside, the compressor inside, the coil outside in that unit gets hot, because it doesn't have that fan running. So it gets hot, and the hotter it gets, then that ice starts to thaw off. What do you think happens when all that heat and that water melting from that ice hits the cold air? What do you get? Steam. And when it rises up, it looks like that unit is on fire. Now, I'm used to it. This is what I do for a living. But you put that in for old Mrs. Jones, who never had a heat pump. She was used to a gas furnace or an oil furnace, and she got converted over and put a heat pump in. Well, now she's standing at the kitchen sink. She's washing dishes after breakfast in the morning, and she looks out, and all this steam is rolling out of the unit. First thing they say, because we get called. If you guys don't, I'd be shocked. But we get called all the time. My unit's on fire. This thing's brand new. This thing was smoking like a freight train. it really wasn't smoke, it's really steam. But again, that's another one of those nuisance calls that you get. You know, you'll get out there, by the time it's done, it's all frosted, defrosted, and everything's good. You're standing over it going, it's working, nothing wrong with it. Because we do the same thing. So that's another thing that I wanted to point out to you guys. Earlier I had mentioned on the combustion of the furnace, it needs this air. If you get bad combustion, and honestly I see it more on LP furnaces than I do on natural gas furnaces, but if you get bad combustion in here, it creates sooting problems. If the people don't know it, or the people just think, well, I'll let it ride, see what happens. I've seen it happen. It actually soots so bad that it stops up that heat exchanger inside. Now what kind of combustion do you think you have? Not much at all. But I have seen them run. I've actually seen a gas furnace, an LP gas furnace, sooted up an entire house to the point that after disaster came out there and they were washing drapes, walls, carpets, clothing. I mean, luckily the people had good insurance, but it just totally, practically destroyed everything in the house from sooting. So you guys want to get that call. Now, that particular one that I went to that did all that was a cracked heat exchanger. They weren't having it serviced every year. Heck, I don't think they'd ever had it serviced. They had this problem. They called you guys out. You guys came out and said, hey, it's a problem with your furnace. You know, we've got it shut off. There's no smoke or anything now. But you need to have your furnace looked at. We go out there and the heat exchanger was busted wide open. And was busted because it was never set up properly, never maintained properly. So when it burnt, it just kept creating soot, kept creating soot, kept creating soot. That soot builds up in the heat exchanger and it holds that heat in. And that excessive heat busts the heat exchanger. The heat exchanger is only rated for so much. It's rated for so much heat because it's removing that heat through the exhaust. Even on an oil furnace, you know, you got oil furnace, the old metal pipe. We at Berico, of course, deal with more oil furnaces than probably anybody in Greensboro. There's just not that many oil technicians anymore. But oil is bad for sitting up. Bad for sitting up. And it's not bad because the oil is bad. It's bad because people don't have it maintained, or they have people maintain it that don't know oil. And that's kind of like calling somebody from a car wash to come put your fire out instead of calling you guys. You know, y'all are professionals. That's why we call you. Same thing with this situation. An oil burner is, for lack of a better way of putting it, it works almost like a carburetor on old cars. Now, I see some of you guys are pretty young, probably don't remember carburetors on old cars. How old are you? 34. You might remember a carburetor. Well, basically, it's a fuel-air mixture, is all it is. The amount of fuel versus the amount of air that it's taking in. And you play with that mixture. If you turn the fuel up, you have to turn the air up. You know, who has enhanced a car or a motorcycle and done an upgrade on the exhaust and upgrade on to jack the fuel up? You know, these days it's fuel injected, so you have to have a map and everybody. Anybody done that? And every time you do, if you change the air or you change the exhaust, you have to change the combustion totally. So if you increase airflow, you have to increase fuel. If you increase fuel, you have to increase airflow. If you decrease the exhaust, then you have to decrease everything because now you're not getting rid of it. What happens with oil furnaces is 9 times out of 10 they're not maintained or they're maintained improperly, so they're not set up to burn clean. It'll burn, it'll work, it'll heat. People will be happy-go-lucky. Hey, John Smith just left the house. Furnace is working good. Until you have another situation like I've seen when you go down to the basement and everything's black. Everything is black. I mean, black as this pipe black. The floors, the walls, anything they have sitting there is black. Because it was not burning properly, it creates sooting. The sooting builds up inside of here, and you can look in that pipe. I've gone to them to do a general maintenance. Open that draft regulator up and look in that pipe, and the walls are that thick with soot. What's that doing to your exhaust? Now you're shrinking it. Without as much exhaust, now you're not burning properly. Now you're sitting more. So you see, it's a domino effect. It starts out as one thing and it just tumbles from there. You're going to run into a lot of sooting caused from oil. That's the majority of calls that you're going to run into with that. You may also actually run into some oil spills, oil leaks, type of things. These fittings and stuff wear over time. Again, most of it is lack of maintenance. If people were having their equipment maintained annually, as is recommended by all manufacturers, by a professional that knows oil, you're not going to have that problem. They're going to set it up properly. They're going to make sure all the fittings are tight, that there's no leakage. Now, I'm in no way saying that that can't change every time. You know, I may go out to your house and set it up and have nothing leaking, but if it's old lines and it's been here for 50 years, somewhere or another it may start leaking out a fitting or something. It may just need to be resealed, retightened down, reflared. All these fittings that we do on these copper lines for oil is a flare fitting. Everybody know what a flare fitting is? We actually take the copper, and there's a tool that tightens down and actually takes it into the copper and flares it out, mushrooms it out. That seats against a fitting, and as it's tightened down, it just presses that mushroom end up against it so nothing can get by it. And so that's basically what a flare fitting is. And all of these fittings in oil are going to be from flare fittings and flare connections. The heat exchanger for your oil furnace is in behind here. Most of them are what I call a pot belly heat exchanger, which is a tub, a big metal tub that sits in here. And just like the heat exchanger on the gas furnace, as that flame burns, with the only difference being that on an oil burner, there's one single flame that comes off the end. It's a very hot heat. Oil is a hotter heat than any of the other fuel sources. Put it in perspective for you, you're looking on a modern day heat pump, on heat pump alone without the auxiliary heat, you're looking at about a 30-degree temperature rise. That means if you're taking in 70-degree air, you're putting out 100. On a gas furnace, you're looking anywhere from 45 to 55, even 60-degree rise. On most oil furnaces, you're looking at a 70-degree rise. Oil is actually a hotter heat. Oil may be a little more expensive per gallon, but it actually produces more BTUs. That's important for you guys to know, because if for some reason a safety should fail, there are safeties on here for high limit on here and on gas furnaces. If it gets too hot inside here where that heat exchanger is, it'll actually shut the burner off. This is the oil burner. It actually fires through spark electrodes at the end, and the flame comes out the end of a cone. When it comes out the end of that cone, as I said, it's just a big yellow flame shooting out the end of that cone, heating that heat exchanger up. If it gets too hot because either the coil's stopped up, there's a duct issue, whatever the reason may be, then it's designed to trip the limit and shut it off. If by some chance that limit should fail to operate, now you're going to have a serious overheating problem. So when you guys get there, the furnace is going to be glowing red. It's going to be hot. But in my 16 years, I don't think I've ever seen a high limit on an oil furnace actually fail. Rick, have you ever seen one fail?
Yes, sir.
They've actually pretty much got that down pat, which is kind of why they do that. There are other safeties involved too. There's usually safeties in the blower compartment. If it gets too hot in the blower compartment, i.e. the blower's overheating, it's about to burn out, it's designed to actually shut the system off. That's true with gas furnaces. It's true with these. Even some heat pumps have them in the blower compartments. They also, all heat pumps have a high limit safety in the electric heat strip, or what we call a heat kit itself, because that's where your real heat, I mean, let's face it, 30-degree rise is not really getting that hot, is it, in comparison. So your real heat's coming out of that heat kit. So if that heat kit gets too hot, it's designed to shut the system down. On an oil furnace, it's designed to shut this burner off, so there's no flame, but it keeps the blower rolling. It keeps the blower rolling because it's trying to cool the system down, because it knows, hey, there's a problem with heat. So let's keep the blower going, blowing air across it, and eventually it'll cool down. On oil furnaces in particular, the way that the blower is activated on the heat side is by the heat. Once it reaches a certain temperature, the blower comes on, blows the air. When it cools down to a certain temperature, the blower shuts off. That's the way that they're designed to work. What you guys are going to deal with, like I said, is going to be sooting problems and oil leaks. So if you come to one and there's an oil leak, you've got oil coming from here, you're going to want to shut this valve off. If you've got oil coming from beyond that unit, then you're going to want to shut the tank off. Okay? Most of your above ground tanks now, we usually try to set up with a bottom feed line. In other words, it's almost like a water faucet that's at the bottom of the tank, and literally it shuts on and off like a water faucet. And there's a flare fitting on the bottom of that, and that's the line that's feeding inside. Okay? Now sometimes we still have a lot of in-ground tanks. There's a lot of buried tanks out there still that we service the units on. Those are usually a two-line system. One line is feeding fuel in, the other line is feeding fuel back. Now, that's important for you guys to know, because you may need to shut both those lines off if you've got an oil issue. Because one can still hold oil in it and be feeding it back. There's still pressure on that going back to the tank. So you're going to want to shut the fuel off at the tank. Well, you can't really do that with a buried tank, because the tank and most of the line is buried. But when it comes into the house, there should be a shut-off, very similar to this one, to shut that fuel off. So if you have a spill, it's leaking off for some reason, reach up there and shut it off. What we were talking about before on firing up systems, if we put in a new system, they actually have a coating on the heat exchangers. Sometimes guys forget to burn that off or forget to tell the customer about it. You fire that up, it stinks, it smokes, it will set off fire alarms. If they turn that on, I promise you their fire alarm is going to go off. The smoke detector is going to ring. In which case they're going to call you out, and then if you find that it's a new furnace, by all means shut it down, call us. But most likely that's all it was in that situation. The last thing that I have on here is actually just a little funny. Fire is hot. You fellas be careful and don't get burned. And again, from me and from Berico, thank y'all for all that you do. We do appreciate your service, and please tell your friends that couldn't come today that we appreciate your service as well. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. I got a question.
Sure, please.
Yeah, if like we respond, it smells like fire or it's smoky, whatever, and we ask the question, did you just turn your heat on for the first time? Yes, I did. We understand what that probably is. If they say, no, I had it on for 3 days and then I turned it off 2 days ago and then I turned it back on, that kind of. Mm-hmm. Should that happen? Would that happen again?
No, it shouldn't. If they have actually burned it for 3 consecutive days and they actually have ran for 3 consecutive days, then no. The burn off should be done after the first day. Really, that wouldn't even take a day to burn it off, depending on how much they're using it. Now, again, let me reiterate, depending on how much they use it. With the way our weather is here, people get chilly in the mornings, they'll fire it up for 15 minutes and then shut it back off. If they've done that, then it may take several days of doing that to get it all burned off. If you fire it up just for, 10 minutes to knock the chill off while you get out of the shower, it may take a few days for it to all get burned off. But what I would say to you is, if you show up and that's the case, if it's still smoking, by all means, then we got other issues. But what you can do, and I would suggest for you to do, is while you're there, and with your safety equipment there, is while you were called, turn it on, let it run. And I don't know if you ever smell of dust burning or not, but we learn in our industry, as I'm sure you guys most assuredly learn in your industry, that everything burning makes a different smell, right? So whether you smell exhaust burning, or whether you smell dust burning, or whether you smell an electrical burn, you know the different smells and what it is. And if you ever smell dust burning off one time, you'll know. I mean, it's just that simple. And I don't care what type of heating system it is. If it's sat all summer, they're going to have dust burn off when it starts. I've seen it where houses have sat vacant for a while, and people fire it up, and it set off the smoke alarms. There was so much smoke, and literally that's all that it was. But I understand them being concerned. I would be too, especially if I, had just moved into a house and fired up the heat, and now I think the house is burning down, with all my stuff that I just moved into it. So that's a very good question. Like I said, if they have really ran it and it's been cold, they've been using it, then no, it shouldn't be smoking, and we got something else going on that we need to be concerned about. And as always, it never hurts to have us come out and check it. I mean, I'd much rather be safe than sorry, as far as that goes. Just like with you guys, if people smell smoke, you'd rather them call you out for nothing than, the house burned down, and then now you guys are in more danger trying to put the fire out in the first place than if they'd have called you right away. Any other questions? Anybody have any other questions about anything that we went over?